I'm ready.
Three, two, one.
Today, we're going to be talking about, those setbacks, those disasters, those tombstones that you have of personal failure. And I got to say that Wendy and I have this incredible failure graveyard, and we're going to turn over some of those tombstones today and see what we dig up. What are we talking about today, Wendy?
Oh my goodness. So today's episode is really, yes, all about failures and maybe your failure graveyard and really turning those setbacks that you've had into comebacks. And the takeaways that we're going to give to you to help you find and build resilience, because that is really the turning point to having failures, is being able to define what it is, finding the right growth behind the failure, reaching out for support, building that resilience. So we're going to share some stories with you on how you can do this in the next 30 minutes. So let's go.
So, Wendy, why would we even want to talk about this, right? Like, some of this stuff is super sensitive, it's painful, it's like dredging up the past, but it's the way we learn. And so I like to think of it this way. And I look at our failures in business and everywhere else in life and like to think, how is that thing that was so bad, the worst thing that ever happened, how did that turn out to be the best thing that ever happened? And what's the gift inside of each one of those failures?
I was thinking about this episode during lunch and I was already getting a knot in my stomach thinking about it, like reliving the thoughts that we want to share with you. But because we want to share this, and it's so important to understand that we have had so many failures and even really big ones that in this particular year, we've had failures that also included losses, like lost members of our family and friends. So this just feels like a double whammy. But we've used these same takeaways and tips to help us kind of navigate through this and stay on top, because failure is a two-way street. And the first place you can go to is the blame game. And like David loves to say,
The power goes where the blame flows. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But part of resilience is taking responsibility for those failures. And they become the stories, right? The stories that you can tell in life. But sometimes you just need to wait until like the wounds heal, right? Till it scars over. And then you have a little bit better perspective on it. I think we also want to talk a lot about not only failure, but sometimes missed opportunities are considered failure. Sometimes compromises, they're not failure. It's just a way to get through things. Or even a wise exit, right? And we had what turned out to be a wise exit this year. But let's roll into this episode because I think there's a lot of really good stuff here that is going to be shareable and relatable in everybody's lives, especially if you're a couple working together in business, because there's plenty of failure and blame to go around.
if you're just joining us, welcome to the Embers Rising podcast. I'm your host, Wendy J. Joining me here today is my co-host, business partner, and love of my life, Mr. David Tucker. So welcome. We are on a mission to help couples find balance in their work and their personal life. And this episode is so powerful because we're talking about the failure graveyard that we've had and maybe that you've had and are working through to get some tips on how to come back and build your resilience to feel good. Because if you're listening to this right now and you're going through one of those failures at the moment or feel like something's a failure, you're probably feeling really terrible. So I'm super fired up that you actually found our podcast episode to listen to, because we have some really golden nuggets to share with you. So let's dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in. And before we do this, I just want to frame this a little bit and just say that in the last 12 months, we've had a lot of things happen, but some of the personal things that happened, I lost my mom. My son committed suicide, and we just lost, my best friend, my brother-in-law, a family member to ALS, and we were with him through those last moments. So, those life events, like, they sometimes tend to magnify even minor failures and blow them out of proportion. But I just want to share that because it's that season, right? It's that time of life. We have those things going on. So I feel you, Wendy. I feel that knot in my stomach too. And that's why I said, are we really even going to talk about this at this point in time? But let's do it, because we have a monumental failure that we're going to wrap this entire episode around. And I'll let you share. I'll let you share the beginnings of that.
All right, because at the end of the day, we do want to share the gifts that have come out of that. And there's always gifts that come out of failures, even though it's incredibly hard to see them at the moment when you're going through the failure. But let's talk about it. So we had a wonderful friend who'd we known for 5 or 6 years who came into our life, and we had started working together, but he really wanted us to go all in on a project of his. And so we did. We went all in, but in order for us to do that, we really had to scale down our two marketing agencies to like be 100% focused on his business and goals. And we did that. And we joined a brand new team, and we were all fired up going in one big giant direction until the vision and leadership changed and communication changed and things started not going well between us and our new partner. And this started feeling a lot of friction from both sides. And David and I weren't really getting what our agreements were when we originally kind of signed up for it. So it was a venture that we took on, and we, like David said, we had a kind of an exit that we needed to make anyway, and we weren't really in our heart passion. And this just kind of goes back to a couple of my episodes at the very beginning. We started this podcast about following your intuition. And I know that David and I's heart really was not 100% there. We were doing it because we believed in our friend big enough to actually make this move, but our heart wasn't 100% there. And it was putting a lot of pressure on our marriage, considering the leadership roles that we were taking and the responsibilities that we really wanted to perform at the highest level and showing up every day. So it's like we were being the $1 million coaches, managing this team with incredible connections and my goodness, I don't even know how to say it, just incredible content creators that were helping us really build this next stage for somebody. And then it left our life about middle of this year.
And Wendy, I've never heard you just go through that process with such clarity and with so little emotion, right? Because let's face it, if you're listening to this podcast and you're in business, especially if you're a couple in business together, you probably have had one of those partnership breakups, one of those deals gone wrong. Maybe it was an investment, something like that. It was all of those things for us. And, I heard someone say once that a business partnership breaking up can be just as painful, if not more painful, than actually a divorce, right? Going through a divorce. And that's sort of what it was. But it included everything, right? It included a loss of a relationship, a loss of money, a loss of trust, all of the things that sort of like are core drivers, core emotional drivers. And we came out the other side. It's funny the way Wendy and I interact, because we got the news that the partner was ending the partnership, not with a phone call, not with a meeting, but with an email that we got at 5:00 in the evening, right? Like, it's over. Very professional. What our response to that was, hey, we've got some free time. And what was your suggestion, Wendy?
Wow. So, well, my first suggestion was how to process what we had just been through. And it took me months, like 4 months.
But your second suggestion was to go put the bike rack on the Toyota and head to Sun Valley.
Yes. Yeah. First of all, I went through the process of what's the next steps for me to actual processes, and who do I need in my support group to share this with and really get perspective. And then, yes, there is a takeaway that we're going to share with you. And that is talking about what we ended up doing. That was a lot of fun. So I want to talk about the gifts that came from this failure, because during the time we were with this partnership, we had created incredible relationships with incredible content creators and making someone else just become this next influencer. And for us, we were just from our heart, as David and I always are, working from our heart. And we started creating, and this was part of the gift. So when that relationship ended, our relationships with these other people and these other businesses were still intact. We're still faithful. We're still 100% on. And how could we continue actually working with them if we chose to? And they're kind of in the same space that we wanted to go, even with our personal brand. So we're like, how can we just turn those relationships into engaging with us on what we want to do? So I just want to say that, Dave, real quick, because I think relationships is like the biggest thing for us in our life is people. And we love people and we love figuring out how to make this positive relationship. Don't love toxic people. That's another episode. But but relationships that have led to, for us, creating things like a personal brand, helping us build this podcast, Embers Rising, and just being in continued training and coaching with these incredible people. So that is one big gift that came out of that failure.
Yeah, awesome, right? Like all of those people. And it's interesting, some of them saw us go through the process and they had silently questioned where we were headed in that process anyway. They're like, this just doesn't seem like you guys. One of the most incredible gifts that came out of it is, as a couple working together, and now we had pivoted from having our own businesses to partnering up with someone else who it was their core business that we were driving. Was it created this friction in our marriage, right? Because it was a strange space for us. It was new. We were really more separated than together because of the way our skill sets are, or where our talent levels are. And so that didn't feel good. So we started having the conversation around, are we having marriage trouble, right? Like, are we having a relationship issue here that's deeper than just the normal, like day-to-day, back and forth friction? And so it's funny, the day that email came, a couple days later, I'm like, hey, that pressure all seems to be gone. So what a gift, right? Like, there was that external pressure that was creating internal strife.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we're going through the gifts right now, and I just keep toggling back to the failure because it did take us so long. And so I don't want you to think that it was just easy breezy and we just moved right on to the gifts. It does take a while to see those gifts. And I think one of the biggest things you can think about if you're going through a failure or have been, obviously we know everyone has a tombstone out there in a graveyard of a failure or something they feel like's been a failure, but turn around and ask yourself, okay, what are the gifts? This actually came from someone that we were just having a coaching call with, really. And we had shared our sob story, and they literally, with like no emotion, straight up and said, okay, so what are the gifts? Like with no emotion. We were like, oh man, we got to think about that, you know? So I share that just because it took a while to get through the rocky road. It was not just like one night the whole thing was over. That it took like weeks and months and all this. But the gifts that we got out of that were definitely the relationships that we created that were super heartfelt, that we wanted to go in the same direction. Our marriage did turn around, more opportunity poured in, more possibility that we could ever imagine started coming into us. And then we had to really start becoming unshakable and really apply these tips, these takeaways to build our own resilience, because we could have got very hung up in this story that we're just failures and it never worked and kind of gone down that rabbit hole. However, we both look at our past and know for a fact that we can just use our personal growth strategies to be better. And if we use those strategies for ourselves, then we know that we can build something even better than where the direction that we were going, and it's going to fulfill our mission and purpose in life.
And it may sound so cliche, right? Like, fail your way to the top. And everybody talks about, how the successful business people, athletes, actors, creators have so much more failure than they do to have success. But it's cliche for a reason, right? And that's because it's true. And it's what you do with those failures inside your own ego that helps you either move forward or they can sink you, right? With that said, let's take the event, let's throw it out, and let's talk about maybe some of the takeaways that anybody can use to, create comeback from failure. I like to think of these as sort of ingredients.
Dave loves ingredients. He loves cooking. So let's go with ingredients.
All right. What's the first ingredient?
The first ingredient is reframing your definition of failure to yourself. And what does that mean? Because if you can redefine the failure, then it becomes the building block of your resilience. And you have to ask yourself, what did I learn? What did I get out of this? So is it really a failure? Yeah, it can still be a failure, and that's okay. But you don't have to stand in the story, in the muck of it all for however long. I always like to think of these failures as like hot coals in my hand and just like, okay, gotta let it go, gotta let it go. Cause the longer it stays on you, the longer it's gonna burn so deeply inside of you that you're standing in that story for years and years and years and you never let go of it, you know?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I like to do in reframing the definition of failure is don't try and jump on it right away. You need to give things a little time, right? Like at the beginning, I talked about the losses that we had in our family. And while they're not failures, right, it's sort of the same sort of thing, right? You just are taken down. But what I do is I like to really give myself the time, but to put it on my schedule. And you're like, is he going to talk about scheduling again? And the answer is yes, right? Like literally, when my mom died, I said, okay, this is going to hurt and it's going to hurt forever. The time that I'm going to spend being down ends on this day. And I literally just put a little note in my calendar. And when it came up, I'm like, all right, I love her. I'm going to miss her forever, but I'm not going to actively be mourning that. And I think when it comes to, business failure, you need to do the same thing. I did that with this situation, right? And it was a very short sort of time period. I'm like, all right, I'm going to give it a week, and then it's not going to be in my frontal lobe where I'm thinking about it all the time. It'll pop up from time to time. It's going to become a scar, but I'm not going to focus on it because I need to move forward in my life.
And I was just saying, one of the things that really helps you stand on top of this is literally writing this down. Just take a pen and paper, pencil, whatever on your phone, write it down. Literally, just even if it's one word, what did you get out of it? What did I get out of what we just went through on a partnership? Dissolving is relationships. If I were going to choose one word, my relationship healed with myself, with David, with other people, with possibility, with opportunity. Like one word that got me feeling better about the situation, the gift of that. I also felt kind of yucky though, because I lost a friend, and it wasn't just the partnership and the team that we lost and the people that we thought were our friends that never contacted us or reached out to us again, but we lost a dear friend, someone who we actually believed and really loved dearly. And yeah, that actually I felt hurt worse, David, and took me a much longer to get over than you, months and months to think about like, how do I forgive this person and then like let it go so that I can build my own resilience on this.
I hear you. And we each process things differently. Men and women process things differently, individuals. But a couple of the other things that I think are key that I learned, and I don't know if this is going to resonate with anybody that's listening, but number one, really think very, very carefully before you burn the boats, right? And, we landed on this island and it was almost insisted that we burn the boats. Now I know why. But, that really didn't serve us. The other thing is, this mindset of you got to put all your eggs in one basket. Don't tell that to Gary Vee because he'll probably just laugh at you. You don't need to do that. And I understand like you got to have a core thing and you got to get it working and get it cash flowing for you. But, branch out and find some other failures. And yeah, those are just two sort of important things that, first of all, I never believed and I bought into it. And I bought into it for one reason, and it's money. And so I started chasing in that particular instance, really focusing on chasing more money than my intuition. So let's move on to ingredient number two.
Yeah, I was going to say that brings us to tip number two. And tip number two, ingredient number two, is building a growth mindset. And I love this because at the exact same time of this failure was happening, I had an opportunity come up, and like the partnership hadn't ended, but an opportunity at the same time came up to coach with someone that I've been really wanting to coach with for many years. And I said yes to it. And I had no idea where it was going to take me. And that was actually following my intuition. And intuition plays such a huge role in things not working out, because you have to ask yourself, it didn't work out for a certain reason. It's probably the best that it didn't work out for a certain reason. And that's where you go through the list of like, okay, what did I learn? Where did I grow? And my intuition, the gift of something else, is driving your heart to do something more. And it's equipping you with everything that you already need to do the next thing, to take the next steps. So for Dave and I, we were now also at the same time, which we didn't know because it was just maybe a couple of weeks apart, maybe a few weeks apart, going into a new opportunity of coaching with someone new who led us down building a brand new podcast, which we had been wanting to do for so many years. I had been wanting to do it for over 7 or 8 years. So that was so exciting for me. And I just want to remind you that listening to your intuition, the nudge that's always constant in the background, is the one thing that is like driving you towards your purpose. I know that Oprah talks about filling up your cup and filling up your cup so full before you can give yourself away. Our cups coming into that partnership, David, was not full. We were already on a half empty gas tank with our 2 agencies at the moment. We were not filled up with ourselves, our marriage, and then we went into something even bigger, and it was just like draining us. So it was a massive gift that like things shifted, and now here we are with you and going in a whole nother direction. So I just want to share that intuition plays such a huge role. I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I mean, intuition means something different to everybody. What I'm trying to say is, right, like sometimes fear feels like intuition, and it might be, but intuition is something different. And I think some people are born with it, some people develop it a little bit more. I know we actively work those signals that come in that are intuition. And in that certain circumstance, I went against a lot of things that intuitively I was feeling, and I like brushed it aside. I'm like, all right, I'm looking at numbers and I'm not looking at what's actually coming in on my radar from an intuition standpoint. So
Yeah, for sure. And, if you're asking yourself, hey, I don't really have intuition, watch for red flags. If you're in a situation or a service or a project with your partner and you're seeing some red flags, like, what a red flag is, something that doesn't feel good, it doesn't align with your values, definitely start noting those down. I had a couple of episodes, I think maybe first or second episode of Embers Rising podcast here, talk about how to notify and what to do with red flags, because that is so important for you to take the next steps and kind of move on from failures or get out of something. Like David says, exit gracefully when you need to, because you've got too many red flags. So you need to let it go.
absolutely. And the last thing I want to say about, growth mindset here is I'm just going to go back to the opening where we talked about blame, and power goes where blame flows. Or is it the other way around? Anyway, in a lot of failures, especially when you're a couple working together, you may have that urge to want to point at another party and blame them for the whole thing. And what that does is it really takes you out of your greatness. It takes you out of your power. It makes you a victim, right? Because now you're not in control. You're not the one that's responsible. And I like to flip that upside down and really take responsibility for everything that happened. And in this circumstance, like there were enough red flags, Wendy mentioned, there was that intuition, like this outcome that happened in the partnership was a knowable thing, right? It was knowable going into it. And so by taking that blame and saying, all right, like I took a shot, it didn't work out, it's my fault. And then, decompressing over whatever amount of time it is, it allows you to have that growth mindset to move forward. And I think that's super important. And in today's world, I see so many people that are pointing the finger of blame at everybody else, whether it's the government, right, their parents, their business partner, their spouse, whatever it is. And it just puts you in your smallness, right? It makes you not in control of your life and the driver of your destiny. So take responsibility. Sometimes it's a bitter pill to swallow, but at the end of the day, you'll be able to recover from it much quicker. All right.
Tip number 3, thanks for sharing that, David. Tip number 3, ingredient number 3 is really diving into a community of friends, family, or even a brand new community for support. And the reason I say that is so important, and I'm not talking old fashioned, like I've got to go to counseling now, which does help. I love that. I guess it isn't really old fashioned. I've used it so many times. We've used it so many times. But I'm also like, we were very brave going into something and embraced a brand new support group, a new tribe. Even if you have to pay for it, sometimes it's where your heart may be to help also get a different perspective, because sometimes you will share your story and someone else will say something and be like, I didn't see it that way at all. And high performers, we need to make decisions and move on from things quickly. We don't want to stay down in the muck of just a failure, because everybody, Gary Vee, Oprah, Brendon Burchard, Tony Robbins, all these incredible people have had so many failures that didn't work. So, however, they didn't stick at the bottom of it and stay down. Can you imagine if Gary Vee just stayed down in the muck for however long? No, he turned himself around and be like, all right, let's go. That didn't work. It hurts. I lost a lot of money. I lost a lot of X, but I'm going to turn this around. But having a support network to help you with perspective, I think, is one of the biggest things. So when things like this happen to us, I'm a super reach out. I reach out to you guys on social. I reach out to my inside network. I reach out to my coaches just to help me get perspective. Dave does it a little bit differently, but I really believe in finding a community to support you, definitely while you're going through a challenge or a feeling of failure, because it's not all about you. It could be all about them or the project or the situation. I mean, yeah. So anyway, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on that, but I just want to say, Dave, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I do. And I just want everybody to hear loud and clear the things or the community support networks that you didn't reach out to, right? And so often, reaching out to family is not the best thing in this situation because, misery loves company. Also, there are certain people in your network that just don't understand a growth mindset. You may love them, you may hang out with them, you may be related to them, but at the end of the day, when they hear what you're saying, all it does is trigger their issues, right? And so they start to feed it back. It becomes this feedback loop of negativity. And I personally would rather be in a community of high performers that will listen to what's going on and then, maybe hold you accountable, maybe break down where things went wrong, maybe talk about how you could have done things better, but certainly not just toss back at you another negative hand grenade because you don't need it in that time, in that space. You're looking to move forward with a growth mindset, even if you got to put some bandages on.
Yep, absolutely.
And I love you out there, family. If you're listening to this, please don't take it the wrong way. But I think everybody understands what I mean. And
Yes.
Our family doesn't listen to our podcast anyway.
All right, I've got to give a bonus tip out because this is my favorite one. When you're going through a failure, you definitely need tip number 4, which is all about scheduling a release valve. What does that mean, David?
Right. I think I let the cat out of the bag at the beginning, but everybody's been so enamored with our talk that they've forgotten about it at this point. So, a release valve is like getting out of your surroundings, getting out of what's going on and getting a new perspective, right? And for us, often that means going to the bottom of the ocean or the top of a mountain.
When this situation happened, about 2 weeks later, we decided to schedule release valve and said, hey, let's pack the bikes on our 4Runner and head up to the mountains of Sun Valley and let's bike and hike and just be in nature for a week. And we did that. And it was so worth it. It was so great. It was definitely just getting away, regrouping, resetting. And I have found this all my whole life is every time there is a big stress that has come in, I have definitely needed to regroup, but getting away, changing my environment has been one of the biggest game changers for me. I mean, take a trip, really. It's just so important because sometimes when you stay in the same environment, it just feels like that problem is still there or that failure is still there. You haven't let go. But when you take yourself to the ocean or the mountains or into nature or schedule a spa vacation or, any of that, it definitely changes things in your mind where you're starting to look at things and you meet different people, you have different experiences, or go do something that you absolutely love. Get away, schedule that release valve. It's so healthy for your mind, body, and spirit. It just kind of what am I trying to say? The words are not coming to me, but it's I get re-energizing your cells, re-energizing your cells to actually yes, we can do this. And I'm cheering for you. So the whole energy about your changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I think I turned to you and I'm like, what are we going to do? You're like, load the bikes. Let's go to Sun Valley. You've got a new mountain bike anyway. And, 24 hours later, we've got our bikes on the back of a chairlift going to the top of the mountain. And I've just got this big shitty grin, right? Because just the mountains are just beautiful in the Sawtooths. And, it was really there that we started to talk about the gifts that were coming out of that failure and starting to put the pieces back together, the things that were working correctly. So yeah, I like that release valve. And besides, our schedule had been cleared for the entire month, so we had the time.
Well, that wraps it up, everyone. I hope that you've been thinking about ways that you can come back from your own failures, or finding just a new way to look at failure, turning your setbacks into a comeback, because that's the most important. And I hope these tips really help you think about that. Thank you so much for being part of our family here at Embers Rising. It's what we do. We want to fan the flames together and build our embers so that we are igniting fires of love, family, faith, and work that serves. That's really important. So let's do that together, because what we are on a mission to do is support each other. So leave a comment below. Let us know maybe what has helped for you, because you guys matter to us and we wouldn't be here without your support. So anything else you want to add, David?
No, just aloha. Thank you for being here.
All right. See y'all. Aloha.
Aloha.